Yeah, so today I'm going to give a bit of a talk about some of the stuff that Ozfish gets involved with. That's a bit more in the background, so it's not the direct fishing stuff that we've just been going through, but it's a bit more about the stuff that makes the fish happen. All right, and so my particular expertise is in fish passage, and so I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown about why fish passage is important and how it affects our native fish. So we've already had a bit of talk about the mulloway, moving up and down the coast. Obviously, if you're in the ocean, there's nothing there to get in your way. And so what I'll be talking about, how within our river systems, we put plenty of things in the way of our fish and stop them being able to do what they need to do. And the thing is that Australian fish have really developed a mode of survival that copes with the really drastic conditions that we have. We had a really, really bad drought only 2 years ago. It was absolutely stone muddlers dry throughout most of the catchments in the Hunter system, all right? And we were really down to these last little tiny little waterholes in those systems, all right? And those little tiny waterholes held all the fish that are now repopulating those rivers that are now got hundreds of kilometres of water within them, all right? And so it's really important that those fish that are left in those little refuge holes are protected so they can survive the drought, and that they can then freely move once they're able to breed up and spread throughout our catchments. And so our fish have really developed these strategies to deal with this boom and bust cycle that Australia's rivers throw at them. And we're not just talking about one or two species, we're talking about pretty much every species of freshwater and estuarine fish in Australia undertake some kind of migration. So things like bream will move into freshwater quite happily. They move in and out of the lakes and around the place. Mullet, they come up and they live in the freshwater. They move out of the freshwater rivers and Hunter River and places like that, move out of there, move all the way up to the Gold Coast to go and spawn. And then the juveniles of those fish come back down the river and down the coast and back up those rivers. So barramundi, bass, mangrove jack, Macquarie perch, Murray cod, all of these fish species undertake a wide range of migrations, and some of them are quite large. They're moving back and forth hundreds and thousands of kilometres within these river systems. And it's not just one stage of life that these fish are moving at. They're moving at all stages. So what we have in Australia, we have things like these tiny little bony bream on the left there. So these guys are really small when they're moving. They're around about 20, 30 millimetres long. And then we've got things like this Murray cod, which can be metre plus. Up north, up in the Gulf country, we have things like sawfish, which can be 3 metres long when they're moving upstream. So it's really important that we cater for all the size classes of fish that are moving through our river systems by making the structures that we build appropriate for them to get past. And so the fish, what we got there just on the left there, that's a mass migration of juvenile empire gudgeons that are undertaking a migration out of the estuary. And as you can see, these fish are tiny. And so this video here is those gudgeons going through a fishway. All right? And so these tiny little fish, you might not think much, you can't really go fishing for them, but they're the basis of the food chain. They're what the bass and everything else, the barramundi, all those things eat. And, they need these fish moving up and down the river so that they can get their food source and they can live and grow and turn into the fish that we want to go out and catch when we go angling. So, please go to the next page. Thank you. So just to give you a little bit of an example, bass, to sort of wrap your head around what the fish are doing. So bass actually live most of their life up in the upper reaches of middle and upper reaches of the freshwater river systems, but they actually breed in the estuary. And so at some point in their life, they will come back down to the estuary as adults, at which point they will spawn in the estuary, and then the juveniles of those fish then move back upstream into the middle reaches. And so we've got these little tiny bass, about 30, 40 millimetres, going back upstream, so they're getting interfered by any barriers that are in the river. And then we've got these adult bass that are also returning back upstream as well. And so these fish are migrating up and down these river systems on a yearly basis to achieve their spawning goals and to get their babies to recruit back up into the river and distribute around those catchments depending on what the conditions are at the time, whether it's wet over on the northern end of the catchment or wet in the south end of the catchment. And so what do we think is a barrier within these systems? What's impeding the migrations? Well, there's lots of different infrastructure that we build in these river systems that block the migrations. So obviously, you know, if you're building a gigantic big dam such as this, that's pretty obvious. Not many fish can get past that. But what a lot of people don't realise is that a lot of our road infrastructure, so the culverts and pipes that we put in so that we can drive across the river system so that we can get to the other side of the river, they can have big impacts on the native fish and their movements within these river systems. And so, you know, these barriers have vertical drops that the fish can't jump over, or they have high velocities that the fish can't swim against. And that makes it really hard for the fish to get up and down the river and to complete their natural life cycle, which can be really difficult and can really impact on the fish communities in those rivers. If we don't allow those fish to go to those areas, what can happen is that the area upstream can become devoid of those fish species. And then if we have a drought in the bit that's left behind where those fish species are, we wipe them out. And then all of a sudden we don't have that fish species in our catchment at all. And so being able to move freely within these catchments is really important, and making sure that these barriers don't interfere with them. Can I press on that and make it play? Got to play? Play? No. Sorry. Technology. It's good. Come on, Jono. Make it play. It should play automatically. He's calling out of the room, is he? Play button down the bottom left. I haven't got glasses on, so I can't see. Just play the video.
Oh, shit. That might be a technical problem.
Okay.
Can we skip that part?
Yeah, you can, I suppose.
I don't know if that's going to play.
I'll press the play button up there.
No, that's pausing now.
No, okay. All right, don't worry about that. That was a beautiful video showing the fish trying to get upstream against that high flow through the culvert, which they were very unsuccessful at doing. So just imagine that in your minds. And unfortunately, yes, Jono. And why is this a problem? Well, the problem we have is that it's us. We're the problem. We've built tens of thousands of barriers to fish migration throughout our catchments. This is just a small segment there. That's the Mile Lake. Every one of those dots on the map is something that's stopping fish migrating within our river systems. All right? And so these tens of thousands of barriers in all of these catchments have a big impact on our fish communities, because all of a sudden, you know, what is a relatively free river is now fragmented into lots and lots and lots of little bits. And as I said, when we have those droughts, if they can't get from section A of the catchment over to section B next time it's wet, because there's barriers in between, if one or the other dries out, we can lose the fish from that section of the catchment.
But just on that issue, is it true that the European carp, that a lot of the roe get caught in duck wings, which is why you find them in dams?
No. No. I'll give you an example. So just to answer that one quickly, 1993, carp were found in Tasmania for the first time. I actually got drafted out of New South Wales Fisheries to take an electrofisher boat down there. The guys got there and they went, "Oh, we think the carp have come in on the legs of the ducks and everything like that." And we went, "So what's in this lake?" "Oh, it's a trophy trout lake." "Oh, okay. So people can come from Victoria with carp in a bucket?" "Yeah, they could." And they'd go fishing in 9 times out of 10, it's human intervention that moves these fish around.
But even when you see them in dams in the middle of nowhere?
Yep. Yeah, look, and this is the amazing thing. So carp are pretty good jumpers. They're really active migrators. And so what we're finding is that there's a whole bunch of areas that people go, "Oh, there's no way they could have possibly got there." One time, it absolutely flogged down with rain and the whole place was awash with water, and they got there. And that's really what happens with that sort of stuff. So no worries. So how do we fix the issue? All right, we've just sort of outlined that there's tens of thousands of these structures around the place. We really need to do something to allow our fish to migrate up and down the rivers. So one of the ways we can do it is to get rid of those barriers. So instead of having a set of pipes there that are really high velocity that the fish can't get through, we replace that with a new bridge. And that's what a lot of councils are doing with a lot of their road infrastructure right the way throughout New South Wales and Queensland. A lot of the old infrastructure that was a small set of pipes are being turned into fish-friendly structures that the fish can get through. So we've got sets of culverts that, again, instead of being a small set of pipes, a big set of culverts with baffles on the walls that slow the water down and allow the fish to get through under all the conditions. For the bigger structures, it may be that we need to build a fishway. So a fishway is basically a set of stairs for fish, pretty much, is the simplest explanation. We create, instead of one big drop, we create a series of very small drops, which our fish are able to ascend. So when people think of migrating fish, the vast majority of people that I speak to immediately go to salmon, and they see the salmon leap in the mighty waterfall. The bears will get there and they're hooking in and they're having a great time eating those salmon that are migrating upstream. Well, unfortunately, our fish are doing it when they're like about this big and they can jump about that high. So we really need to make these conditions really easy for them. So we can have the fishways, can have natural rock fishways, technical fishways that are made out of concrete, and then on really big dams, we actually have a large bucket that's on a hoist, and the fish are caught in the bucket and lifted up and over the dam and dumped into to the other side. And then we have a spillway that's smooth, that the fish are able to go back down, big ski jump down into the pool downstream so they can safely get downstream. However, it's a little bit trickier than that, and it's really not unusual to find that fishways are bad or poor based on old designs. So there's a couple of examples that I've got here. This is a Fitzroy Barrage in Rockhampton. This fishway was an old pull and weir fishway. You can see how turbulent it is and how much white water there is there. And that really had a big impact on the fish community in that river system, in that they were not able to get past that. They're showing up when they're only about this big, and they're not able to cope with those conditions because it's just so energetic, and it's just more than they can take and their swimming ability. And so the analogy I always like to make with these guys is that, it's like if me and Jono got over here and we cleared it off here and we decided to do some sprints through here. If we did one or two, we'd probably be all right. He looks like a fit young fella. If we do 3 or 4, we're probably starting to get a bit puffed. By the time we've done 10, 15 or 20 of them, we're all a bit knackered. Now, if you're a fish that's this big and you've just hatched out of an egg, probably 20 days ago, you don't have much of an energy reserve in your body. And so asking these fish to do, 30 sprints with no rest in between because they've got to sit in this pool going around and around and around like a washing machine is just too much for those guys. So we've developed up these fishways that are specifically designed for these fish that have got, relatively low flow conditions so they can easily get through there. And then they've got these big pools in which they can rest in. And that makes a really big difference. These fish are able to now get to the top of this fishway. So previously, no fish got to the top. Now we're getting sort of 2 to 5 million fish a year are getting through this fishway. And we're just about to build another one on the other bank that's even better again, since we've learnt from this fishway here. Again, got so close, these guys. They built a nice channel. They've got a nice rocky slope there. It looks really good. It doesn't look too bad at all. But the fish basically got to about this point here in the fishway, couldn't get any further. Again, they've done too much sprinting. They're stuffed. They got to the top and they just can't get through. And so we've just literally, that is taken last Thursday. I just came back from Victoria. We've just replaced that fishway here with a pull and weir type fishway like this, and that will end up being nice and gentle. The fish will be able to get up and over and through that nice and easily. So just to wrap it up, getting through it nice and quick so we can get to some food. Really, fish movement is really important. We've seen how the movement occurs within the lake, out of the lake, up and down the thing, and then up and down our rivers is critically important for our fish species. If they can't do it, we do lose them, all right? We end up with these fish, the bass, pretty classic example. Most people think if you're going to go bass fishing, below the weir used to be the old way, go up and find the first weir, find the first barrier, and that's where the bass would be, because that's as far as they could get upstream. So it's really critically important that we allow easy access past the tens of thousands of barriers that we put in these river systems, and that if we incorporate the fishways into new structures early on, they're nowhere near as expensive as if we're putting them onto existing structures. It's quite expensive to retrofit It's still expensive to put them onto new structures as well, but as a proportion of the overall cost, it's quite small. And so, you know, fishways are really, really important. Making sure that we've got fish-friendly road crossings and all that sort of stuff is critically important to make sure our fish can survive through to the next drought and on and beyond. So, a quick version. So, yeah, mate.
With the power station shutting down here in the next 10 years, what are you going to do with all the fish that are locked in there?
In the dam that's associated with it. Yeah. I would imagine that they'll have a fish rescue plan that they'll have to implement as they go through. I'm literally going down on Friday to do one for the new freeway that's going on southern Sydney there, where basically the fish have been locked in there, and yeah, they're going to have to go in and net them all out and then relocate them back into other areas. So yeah. No, definitely. It's something that we've been looking in the Hunter chapter. So I'm with the Hunter chapter. We've been sort of slowly plugging away at getting a bit of a list of barriers. New South Wales Fisheries have done some great work and have got a big long list of all the barriers, but there definitely are some smaller structures. We tend to find that things that are on smaller streams where they've got lots of trees usually are pretty hard to find. So if people find them, let me know about it. I'm happy to put it into the dots on the map. So.
Just a quick question. There's restrictions on certain kinds of fishing in freshwater. I don't do a lot of freshwater fishing, but looking at stream flows, looking at restrictions with climate drivers and changing climate drivers. So between La Nina and El Nino and things like that, we obviously have much higher rainfall some periods and much lower rainfall other periods. I don't think we have fishing restrictions.
No, we don't. And so one of the things that I've been really thinking of, and I think that we're probably, as we go forward over the next few years, so we're in a nice period at the moment, so it'd be really nice to be prepared for the next drought period, which is coming. It's on its way. It's a day closer every day. Those waterholes, like I showed right at the start there, those waterholes are so vulnerable. So we were doing some sampling up in the around Warrialda up in the northwest there, and it was 5 to 10 kilometres between hole, and most of those holes were only from me to here long, and all of the fish that lived in that river were all in that waterhole, and all of the cows that lived on the farm adjacent to that came down and shit in that same waterhole. And it's beyond me why the only water source they've got, they have to come and urinate and whatnot in it, but they do. And of course, there's some of those waterholes we go into, there's no fish in them because they've been polluted so badly. And so I think it's something that I personally want to start looking into, is starting to map where these last waterholes are and then protecting these last waterholes, because I believe as climate change gets worse, or not worse, but progresses, that there's going to be longer periods of drought. These waterholes are going to be more crucial, and that we need to protect them more than what we do now, because they're currently not protected at all, pretty much. So there was one more.
Just regarding because you mentioned there's a couple of different kinds of infrastructure that go on. They obviously do different things, like hydrodynamically and what they sort of do. I was just wondering, does it get quite species specific in terms of what you do? So, for example, what you would need for a fishway for, say, your empire gudgeon, I imagine be quite different to a larger fish.
Yes. Okay, so what we try and do is best fit for everything. And it's often the fishways are driven by the size rather than the species. So we're looking for what are the smallest species that are moving through, because they're the weakest swimmers and have the weakest swimming ability, and then catering for those, and then doing that in a way that also allows those big fish to go through. And that can get really tricky. When you've got to pass a 3 metre long sawfish and a 20 millimetre long gudgeon, really, really hard and very, very technical. But, there are solutions. It's just how much money you're going to spend.
Just a follow-up question to that as well, sorry. So, anytime I watch anything to do with, fish stocks and everything, they're always talking about how the main threat to a lot of your native freshwater species is your Brenton perch and your carp.
Yep.
So I was wondering if there's any way, that you found that's actually quite exclusory to those problems
Yeah, certainly are. So down on the Murray, there's a thing called a carp cage. So a lot of our fishways down on the Murray River have a carp cage attached to them. And so that cage, it has a section where the carp can jump, and they jump into one half of the cage. And then on the bottom, there's a flap that opens up, and all the native fish go that way. And then every day or two, a commercial fisherman comes along, lifts up the carp and takes away the carp. And that's your Charlie Carp fertiliser you see in Bunnings. That's exactly where that comes from. So that's having a good impact. We're really dragging the carp numbers down. They're still there. There's still a bazillion of them. But at least we're doing something along those lines. And the fishways help with that because it helps to channel fish through a narrow spot where we can actually do that selection back and forth between the two. Yeah. So we'll look at doing that. Redfin, not so much. It's not as easy, but definitely with the carp it works well. So. Yep.
Is there any way that CPI can like try and fight for that percentage to stay at a higher rate when the dams do get worked on that, or is it because the work has to be done at a certain depth and they need to drain so far?
Yeah, look, with Moala and places like that, they do have a strategy for drawing it down in a staged manner, so it doesn't just come roaring down very quickly. And so that's to try and get those fish out of the trees and into the main channel. And that works pretty well. I mean, they have to do those maintenance every couple of years on the gates on that one, so they don't really have much of a choice. So, yeah. All right, we're going to wrap it up there and keep going.
That's brilliant.
Can you just elaborate on the rescue program that had a couple of years ago where they relocated a lot of fish from those dams and water holes and now deciding to put them back?
Oh, yeah, okay, so the pygmy perch, purple spotted gudgeon, so that's what we were doing. We were looking for purple spotted gudgeons up in the north, and so that was one of the species. It's an endangered species up there. We collected a whole bunch from the wild, and they've actually been held at the Grafton Fish Hatchery. And so now that the conditions have returned back to relatively normal, a lot of those fish are being placed back into the river so that we can restock those waterways with those fish that were lost.